On the night of October 23rd, 1856, in Halifax County, Virginia, something impossible took place. A man who had been displayed like a circus attraction, examined like a laboratory experiment, and worked like a beast of burden for 15 long years finally shattered his chains, literally. Goliath stood 7 feet and 6 inches tall. His hands were so enormous they could cradle a man's skull the way a child holds an apple. His shoulders were so wide that he had to turn sideways to pass through most doorways. And on that October night, those same hands that had carried unimaginable loads, those same arms that had been studied, measured, and mocked, became the tools of the most brutal justice Halifax County had ever witnessed. By dawn, 8 white men were dead. The Blackwood family was wiped from existence, and the entire South learned a terrifying lesson. There is no chain strong enough to hold a man who has decided he would rather die free than live enslaved. This is that story, and every word of it is true. But to understand how Goliath became a killer, we must first understand how Cornelius Blackwood turned a human being into a weapon. The auction block in Richmond, Virginia, September of 1841. Cornelius Blackwood had come searching for field hands, strong backs of labor on his tobacco plantation in Halifax County. What he discovered instead was something he had never encountered in 40 years of trading slaves. A boy, perhaps 15 years old, already standing over 6 feet tall. But it was not just the height that drew attention. It was the proportions. Arms that hung past his knees, hands as wide as dinner plates, feet so large they required custom-made shoes, and shoulders so massive they looked almost deformed. The auctioneer was practically glowing with excitement. Gentlemen, I present to you the rarest specimen you will ever see. Direct from the Dinka region of Africa, a people known for extraordinary height. But this one is special even among them. Cornelius forced his way closer through the crowd. Up close, the boy was even more impressive and more unsettling. His eyes were dark and sharp with intelligence, watching everything, measuring every white face that stared back at him. Can he work? Cornelius called out, "Work? This Negro can do the labor of 3 men. I've seen him carry 600 pounds across a warehouse. 600 without strain." The bidding opened at $3,000, already an absurd price for a single slave. Cornelius raised it to $3,500. A plantation owner from South Carolina pushed it to $4,000. Cornelius answered with $4,500. The man from South Carolina shook his head and stepped back. Too rich for him. Sold to Mr. Cornelius Blackwood of Halifax County for $4,500, the auctioneer announced. It was the most expensive slave Cornelius had ever purchased. But as he looked at those massive hands and that towering frame, his mind was already calculating. This was not just a field hand. This was an attraction, an investment. This was something that could make him rich. The boy spoke almost no English when he arrived at Blackwood Plantation. Only a handful of words picked up during the middle passage aboard the slave ship. His African name was impossible for Cornelius to pronounce, something filled with clicks and tones that sounded like music. So Cornelius gave him a new name, a joke, really a piece of biblical mockery. "You're Goliath now," he announced at dinner that first night, making his wife and his 2 grown sons laugh. The giant who was killed by a little shepherd boy. Fitting, don't you think? Goliath, the name he would carry for the rest of his life, stood silently in the corner of the dining room. His head nearly brushed the ceiling. The house slave stared at him as if he were some kind of monster. Cornelius's youngest son, Jacob, tossed a piece of bread at Goliath's feet. "Pick that up, giant. Let's see you bend down." Goliath did not move. He did not even look at the bread. Jacob stood up, his face reddening. "I said pick it up, you big..." "Jacob." Cornelius's voice was calm, but firm. "Sit down. He doesn't understand English yet. Then maybe we should teach him." Jacob snatched a riding crop from the wall. The first strike landed across Goliath's shoulders. The second snapped against the backs of his legs. The third was already rising when Goliath slowly turned. And for just a moment, Jacob saw something in those eyes that made him step back. Something ancient, something dangerous. That's enough. Cornelius stood and moved between his son and his investment. This Negro cost me $4,500. You damage him, you pay for it. Understood? Jacob lowered the crop, but his eyes never left Goliath. Yes, father. That night, in the cellar where Goliath had been chained, the only place with a ceiling high enough for him to stand upright, he touched the raised welts on his shoulders. They barely hurt. He had endured worse on the ship crossing the ocean, and he already knew he would endure worse here. But he remembered Jacob's eyes, the flicker of fear that had appeared when Goliath turned toward him. They should be afraid, he thought in his native tongue. They should be very afraid. Within a month, Cornelius Blackwood had turned his newest purchase into the greatest attraction in Halifax County. Every Sunday after church, plantation owners from all across Virginia would ride out to Blackwood Plantation. $5 per viewing, $10 if they wanted demonstrations of strength. Cornelius built a special exhibition space, a large barn cleared of equipment, with benches arranged in a semicircle like a theater or a gladiator arena. Goliath would be let out in chains, heavy iron manacles locked around his wrists and ankles, connected by links as thick as a man's thumb. By then, he had learned enough English to understand commands, to know exactly what was expected of him. Lift that, Cornelius would order, pointing to a massive cotton bale that weighed at least 300 pounds. Goliath would bend, chains clanking, and hoist the bale onto one shoulder. The crowd would gasp and burst into applause. Women would fan themselves, both scandalized and thrilled. Now the barrel, Cornelius would say, indicating a water barrel weighing 400 pounds when full. Goliath would raise it overhead with both arms and hold it there while the audience counted. 10 seconds. 20. 30. His muscles stood out like thick ship cables beneath his skin. But the real entertainment came with the fights. Who wants to see if 3 men can bring down the giant? Cornelius would shout. There were always volunteers. Young overseers from nearby plantations, bored sons of wealthy families. Sometimes even professional boxers looking to build a reputation. The rules were simple. 3 men against Goliath. Fists only. The first side to surrender lost. If the 3 white men won, they split $50. If Goliath won, he got an extra ration of food that week. Goliath never lost. Oh! They landed punches on him, blackened his eyes, split his lips, even cracked his ribs. 3 men could still cause damage, even to a giant. But Goliath was patient. He waited, absorbing the punishment, until one of them grew careless, moved just a little too close. Then one massive hand would shoot out, clamp around a throat, and lift a 200-pound man off the ground as if he weighed nothing at all. The man's friends would rush forward, try and pull him free, and Goliath would swat them aside. They were not even real strikes, just heavy brushing motions that sent grown men tumbling across the dirt. The fights usually ended with at least one man unconscious, and Cornelius Blackwood, $20 richer from the side bets he always placed. Magnificent creature, isn't he? Cornelius would say proudly, accepting congratulations and glasses of whiskey from his guests. Creature, not man. Never man. That was how he spoke of Goliath, as if he were livestock or machinery. But the exhibitions were only Sunday entertainment. From Monday through Saturday, Goliath worked. The tobacco fields of Halifax County were merciless in August. 95 degrees by 9 in the morning, humidity so thick it felt like breathing through wet cloth. 50 field hands would spread across acres of waist-high plants, cutting and bundling leaves under the watchful eyes of Overseer Thornton. Goliath's role was different. While the other slaves carried normal loads, maybe 40 pounds of tobacco bundles on their backs, Goliath carried 300, sometimes 400. Stacks of bundled leaves were piled so high on his shoulders that the other slaves could not even see his head. "Move faster, giant," Thornton would shout, cracking his whip. The leather snapped into Goliath's shoulders. opening fresh wounds on top of the layers of scars that were already there. Goliath never slowed and never complained. He simply kept moving at that steady mechanical pace, his feet sinking into the mud with each step, leaving impressions 6 inches deep in the soft ground. By noon, when the other slaves were given their 15-minute water break, Goliath was given 10. By evening, when the rest returned to quarters, Goliath worked another hour, loading the day's harvest onto wagons, moving heavy equipment, digging ditches that normally required teams of 6 men. At night, they locked him in the barn, separate from the others. They had welded special chains for him, links as thick as a man's wrist, attached to an iron collar that weighed 20 pounds by itself. The chains were bolted directly into the barn's main support beam. His food was poured into a trough, the way one would feed a horse or a pig. The first year, Goliath ate mechanically, only to survive, nothing more. The second year, he began to understand more English and started to comprehend the conversations happening around him, the way Cornelius Blackwood spoke about him like property, like a plow or a mule. By the third year, something hardened inside him. His eyes, which had once held a faint spark of hope, became flat and empty. The other slaves noticed the change. Uncle Moses, an elderly field hand who had been enslaved for 60 years, watched Goliath closely. "That one's dangerous," Moses whispered to the others in the quarters. "I seen that look before on Nat Turner back in 31, right before he started his rebellion." "Rebellion?" Young Samuel scoffed. "He barely talks. He just works and eats and sleeps. That's what makes him dangerous," Moses replied. "He's thinking, planning, waiting." "Waiting for what?" Moses only shook his head. "Pray we never find out." The fourth year brought Dr. Arthur Whitmore into Goliath's life. Dr. Whitmore was a physician from Richmond with a peculiar obsession: the supposed physiological differences between races. He had published papers claiming that black people were a separate species entirely, closer to apes than to white man. His so-called evidence came from measurements, skull sizes, bone densities, and muscle composition. When Cornelius Blackwood mentioned his 7'6" slave at a gentleman's club, Dr. Whitmore nearly spilled his brandy in excitement. "A giant Negro from the Dinka region? My God, gentlemen, I must examine him. This could be the key to proving my work." "For a fee, of course," Cornelius added smoothly. They settled on an arrangement. Dr. Whitmore would visit once a month, paying $20 per visit plus expenses. In exchange, he could conduct non-damaging studies of Goliath's physiology. The first examination took place in October of 1845. Goliath was chained to a wooden frame inside the barn, his arms spread wide, his legs forced apart, unable to move. Dr. Whitmore circled him like a buyer inspecting livestock, measuring tape in one hand, notebook in the other. Remarkable, absolutely remarkable. From toes to crown, 90 inches. Arms, 96 inches. Skull circumference. The doctor's hands probed Goliath's scalp, his face, his jaw. Pronounced brow ridge. Prognathism of the jaw. All consistent with my theories about. "Can you feel pain?" Cornelius interrupted. "I mean, his skin is so thick. Sometimes I wonder if he even feels the whip." Dr. Whitmore's eyes lit up. "An excellent question, one we can easily test." He reached into his medical bag and withdrew a scalpel. "This may sting a bit." The blade drew a line across Goliath's forearm, 3 inches long and 1/4 inch deep. Blood immediately welled up. Goliath's jaw tightened. His eyes closed, but he did not scream. He did not even groan. Fascinating. No vocal response. Perhaps the pain threshold is indeed elevated. Dr. Whitmore made another cut, this time across the bicep. Goliath's breathing grew faster. Sweat appeared across his forehead, but still there was no sound. Remarkable restraint. Unless the nervous system is genuinely different, less sensitive. We should try again. The third cut was deeper, across the chest. Blood ran in thin rivulets down Goliath's torso. And then, Finally, a sound escaped him, low and guttural, not quite a growl, not quite a moan, something primal. Dr. Whitmore stepped back, satisfied. So he does feel pain. He simply has extraordinary tolerance. I'll note that in my records. Then he turned to Cornelius. Next month, I would like to examine his muscular structure more thoroughly. Perhaps take some tissue samples. Will it damage his ability to work? Cornelius asked. Minimally, a few small incisions, nothing significant. Then we have an agreement. The examinations continued monthly for the next 2 years. Dr. Whitmore would arrive with new instruments, new theories to test, new places to cut, measure, and probe. He took bone samples from Goliath's ribs and measured his lung capacity by nearly drowning him in a water trough. He tested his vision, his hearing, and his reflexes, all in the name of science. All the while, Goliath was chained, unable to resist, unable to refuse. And through it all, Goliath never screamed, never begged, never gave them the satisfaction they were searching for. But behind those flat, lifeless eyes, something was building, pressure like water piling up behind a dam, like lava gathering beneath a volcano, something that could not be contained forever. The 7th year brought Naomi. She arrived in a shipment of house slaves from South Carolina, part of an estate sale after a plantation owner died. She was small and delicate, maybe 5 feet 2, with quick hands perfect for sewing and cooking. Master Blackwood purchased her for $800 to help his wife manage the big house. The first time Goliath saw Naomi, she was hanging laundry behind the house. He was hauling timber for a new tobacco barn, a load that would have required 6 normal men. For 100 pounds of oak rested across his shoulders when their eyes met for just a moment. She looked away quickly. House slaves were not supposed to acknowledge field hands. Different hierarchies, different worlds, but Goliath could not look away. He watched as she moved gracefully between the sheets, humming something soft and melodic. It was a humming that captured him. The tune was from his childhood, a Dinka song his mother used to sing. After he set down the timber, Goliath did something he had never done before. He took an unnecessary route back to the barn, passing close to the laundry lines, close enough that Naomi could not help but see him. She paused in the middle of her song and stared up at him, at this giant, this impossible man. You know that song, he said in English, his voice rough from disuse. She nodded slowly. My grandmother taught it to me before she was sold south. She said it was from the homeland. It is... Goliath closed his eyes, and for just a moment he was not in Virginia. He was standing in the tall grass near the tributaries of the Nile, listening to his mother's voice drifting over the water. It's about the river, about home. When he opened his eyes, Naomi was smiling, small and sad, but a smile all the same. I'm Naomi. Goliath, that's not your real name. No, but it's the only one they let me keep. Their relationship grew slowly and carefully. On Sunday evenings, after the exhibitions and after the work was done, they found ways to see each other. Sometimes it was only for a few minutes. Sometimes, if they were lucky, it was for an hour. They could not touch, not in public, not where anyone might see. Slaves who fraternized across roles could be whipped or worse. And Goliath was far too valuable an investment for Master Blackwood to allow any distractions. But they talked in quiet corners during the brief moments between chores. Naomi taught Goliath more English, better English, the kind that allowed him to understand not just commands but conversations. He began to understand the discussions Master Blackwood had with his sons, the letters Dr. Whitmore read aloud about his fascinating subject. In return, Goliath taught Naomi about the homeland, the true names of things, the old gods, and the way the sun looked as it set over endless grasslands. You remember it? She asked one evening, wonder in her voice. You were so young when you left. I remember every second, Goliath replied. His massive hands that could crush skulls, gently traced patterns in the dirt. I remember my mother's face, my father's laugh, the day the slavers came. I remember all of it, and I hold on to those memories like weapons. Weapons. One day, he said quietly, I will need something to fight for, something beyond just survival. And those memories, this conversation, these are what I will fight for. In March of 1853, Master Blackwood agreed to an unusual arrangement. If two slaves wished to marry, not legally of course, since slaves could not marry, but if they wanted to live together, he would allow it under certain conditions. The conditions were simple. Both slaves had to belong to his household, and any children born would be his property from birth. Naomi approached Mistress Constance Blackwood first, as required. Constance looked at the small house slave with amusement. You want to marry the giant child? He'll break you in half. No, ma'am, Naomi replied quietly. He's the gentlest man I've ever known. Gentle? Have you seen him fight? I've seen him choose not to hurt people when he easily could. There's a difference. Constance shrugged. Ask the master. If he agrees, I won't object. It might be interesting to see what kind of children you produce. Maybe we'll get more giants. The conversation with Cornelius went much the same. He saw a potential profit in breeding his most valuable slave. If Naomi produced giant children, each one could be sold for thousands. If she did not, no harm was done. You have my permission, he told Goliath one evening. You can move into the small cabin behind the quarters, the one we use for married couples. Goliath stared at him. And the chains? What about them? Will I still be chained at night? Cornelius considered this. Goliath had been a slave for 12 years. He had never caused trouble and had never tried to escape. The chains were mostly precaution and theater for visitors. Fine, no chains in the cabin. But if you try to run, I will sell your wife to the farthest plantation I can find. Understood? Understood. That night, for the first time in 12 years, Goliath slept without chains. Naomi lay beside him, her small body pressed against his massive frame, her breathing soft and even. He stayed awake for hours, one arm wrapped protectively around her, staring at the cabin ceiling. This, he thought, this is what freedom feels like. Even in slavery, this moment is freedom. He should have known it could not last. By 1856, Goliath and Naomi had been together for 3 years. There were no children yet, which frustrated Master Blackwood, though he remained patient. These things took time. What Master Blackwood did not know was that Naomi had been using herbs to prevent pregnancy, old knowledge passed down from her grandmother. Wild carrot seeds, rue leaves. She took them every day in secret. I won't bring a child into this, she told Goliath one night. I won't give them another slave to sell. Goliath understood, but part of him, a deep, aching part, wanted it anyway. He wanted a child. He wanted to hold something that was his in a world where he owned nothing. In August of 1856, the herbs stopped working, or perhaps Naomi stopped taking them. Goliath never asked which. All he knew was that one morning she woke up, vomited, and then smiled through her tears. I think I'm pregnant. Goliath felt something crack inside his chest. Not breaking, but opening, like a door he kept locked for years, suddenly swinging wide. Pregnant, he repeated. I'm sorry. I tried to. He kissed her gently, carefully, always afraid his strength might hurt her. Don't apologize. Never apologize for this. For 3 months they kept it secret. Naomi wore loose dresses and avoided Mistress Constance's watchful eyes, but by October there was no hiding it anymore. Mistress Constance noticed first. Girl, are you a child? Naomi hesitated, then nodded. Well, it's about time. The master will be pleased. Tell him at dinner tonight. That evening, as Naomi served roasted duck and sweet potatoes, she quietly told Master Blackwood of her condition. His face lit up with the terrible smile Goliath had learned to dread. Excellent. Finally, we'll see if you breed true to his size. If this child comes out a giant, I'll have a breeding pair. Do you know how much that could be worth? From his place in the corner, Goliath felt the crack in his chest widen. It was no longer a good feeling. It was dangerous. 3 days later, Marcus Doyle arrived at Blackwood Plantation. Doyle was a slave trader, one of the most successful in Virginia. He specialized in specialty merchandise, the kind of slaves that brought premium prices, beautiful women for wealthy households, powerful men for brutal labor, and occasionally pregnant women. There's a market, Doyle explained to Cornelius over cigars and whiskey, for pregnant slaves, especially ones with interesting genetics. Those rich bastards in New Orleans, they're bored with regular breeding programs. They want experiments, curiosities. You're a giant's woman, he continued. She's what, 5 feet? 5'2". Cornelius nodded. Perfect. And she's carrying his child. That's a scientific curiosity right there. Half giant, half normal. There are medical men in Louisiana who would pay. Doyle paused dramatically. $3,000 for her. Cornelius's eyebrows rose. 3,000? I paid 800. That was before she was carrying giant seed. Now she's unique, one of a kind. But if she produces a giant child here, I could. Doyle cut him off. Key word, could. Might come out normal-sized. Might not survive the birth. Women that small delivering giant babies, the mortality rate is high. Bird in the hand. Cornelius. 3,000 now, or maybe 5,000 in 18 months. And that's with risk. Cornelius swirled his whiskey. When would you need her? I'm heading back to New Orleans the day after tomorrow. She comes with me. Let me think on it. That night, Cornelius made his calculations. 3,000 immediately versus a possible 5,000 later, with danger attached. If the child died, if Naomi died, his investment would be gone. By morning, his decision was made. He found Goliath in the tobacco barn, loading cured leaves onto a wagon. I've sold your wife, Cornelius said simply. No preamble, no sympathy. Goliath froze. The 300-pound load slipped from his hands and crashed to the barn floor. What? Marcus Doyle made an excellent offer. She leaves tomorrow morning. No, the word came out strangled. No, you can't. I can and I have. She's my property, Goliath. Same as you, same as that wagon. I sell what I please. But the baby is also my property. Doyle is interested in it, wants to see if she produces a giant or not. It's for science. Something must have shown in Goliath's face, some flicker of rage he could not hide, because Cornelius took a step back and called out, Thornton, bring the chains. Overseer Thornton appeared with the heavy iron shackles, the ones used for the Sunday exhibitions. Just a precaution, Cornelius said calmly, until you calm down. Can't have you doing something stupid. They chained him, wrists and ankles, links thick as a man's thumb, bolted him to the barn's central beam, and their Goliath stood powerless as the sun set on his last evening with Naomi. She came to him that night. Somehow she had convinced Mistress Constance to let her say goodbye. 5 minutes. Constance said coldly, that's all you get. Naomi ran to Goliath, her small hands reaching up to his face. He bent down and pressed his forehead to hers. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Don't. His voice cracked. This isn't your fault. The baby will be born free. He pulled back to look into her eyes. I swear it. Somehow, I will find you. I will buy your freedom. Your child will never know chains. Naomi was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Don't make promises you can't keep. I keep all my promises. Time's up, Mistress Constance called. No, please, just another moment. Naomi begged. She pressed something into Goliath's chained hand, a scrap of cloth torn from her dress, the only thing she owned that was truly hers. Remember me, she whispered. Then she was gone, pulled away by Mistress Constance, her sobs echoing through the barn until they faded into silence. Goliath stood alone in the darkness, chained to a beam, clutching a scrap of cloth, and something inside him, something that had been bent and compressed for 15 years, finally snapped. Morning came. Marcus Doyle's wagon waited outside the big house, horses stamping impatiently. They brought Naomi out in shackles, lighter than Goliath's, but chains nonetheless. She was still crying, her face stained, eyes red and swollen. The entire household gathered to watch. Master Blackwood, Mistress Constance, the two sons, Jacob and Nathaniel Jr., Overseer Thornton, Dr. Whitmore, who had arrived for his monthly examination and decided to stay for the spectacle, and Goliath, still chained in the barn but positioned near the door so he could see everything. Doyle loaded Naomi into the wagon like cargo. He did not help her climb. He shoved her. She stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the wagon. "You've made an excellent deal, Cornelius," Doyle called cheerfully. "I'll write you from New Orleans. Let you know if she produces a giant or not." "See that you do," Cornelius replied. "I'm curious." The wagon began to move. Naomi turned, searching the crowd until her eyes found Goliath's. Their gazes locked, and then she screamed. Not words, just raw, animal grief. The sound of something breaking. That can never be repaired. Goliath pulled against his chains once, then again. The iron bit into his wrists, drawing blood, but the links held firm. Master Blackwood laughed. "Easy there, giant. You'll hurt yourself." Goliath pulled harder. The chains creaked. The wooden beam they were bolted to groaned. "Thornton," Cornelius said calmly, "sedate him if you need to." But Goliath had stopped. He stood perfectly still, watching the wagon disappear down the long plantation road, watching until even the dust it raised had settled back into the earth. When he finally turned to face his captors, everyone present would later swear that his eyes had changed, gone flat and cold, like staring into the eyes of a shark or a snake. Uncle Moses, standing with the other field hands, leaned close to young Samuel and whispered, "I told you." Nat Turner's eyes looked just like that, right before Southampton ran red with blood. "What's it going to do?" Samuel whispered back. "Something terrible," Moses replied, "and soon." They kept Goliath chained for a full week after Naomi was taken. No work, just locked in the barn with barely enough food and water to survive. Cornelius wanted to be sure the anger had passed before trusting him back in the fields. On the 8th day, Overseer Thornton came to release him. "Master says you can work again, but one wrong move and you're back in chains." "Understood." Goliath nodded slowly. "Good. Now come on. We're behind on the harvest because you've been sulking." Thornton unlocked the shackles and stepped back quickly, out of old instinct. Something felt different about the giant that morning. Something in the way he moved. Too calm, too focused. "Get yourself cleaned up," Thornton ordered. "Then report to the tobacco fields." Goliath walked to the water trough outside the barn and washed the week's grime from his face and arms. And as he did, he noticed something he had never paid attention to before. The blacksmith shop was only 30 yards away. Through the open door he could see Josiah working the forge, shaping horseshoes, and hanging on the wall just inside the entrance were tools, hammers, chisels, cutting implements, weapons. For 15 years, Goliath had walked past that shop every day and never once considered it. Why would he have? He was property, obedient, broken, but now his mind cataloged everything. The layout, the contents, the possibilities. "Move." Thornton snapped, cracking his whip near Goliath's feet. Goliath moved, but as he walked toward the tobacco fields, his eyes tracked every detail of the plantation, things he had never noticed or cared about before. The big house had 3 entrances. The front door was always locked at night, but the kitchen door, the one used by the house slaves, stayed open until 10 o'clock. Overseer Thornton made his rounds every morning at 5:30, always starting at the slave quarters and moving clockwise around the property, always alone for that first hour. Master Blackwood kept a rifle in his study and a pistol in his bedroom, but he was not a good shot. Goliath had overheard him complaining about missing a deer at 20 yards. The two sons, Jacob and Nathaniel Jr., slept in the east wing on the second floor, in rooms with windows that overlooked the tobacco barn. Dr. Whitmore visited on the third Thursday of every month, always stayed overnight, and always slept in the guest room on the first floor. The driver, Pete, a slave who had been promoted to help manage the other field hands, had his own cabin separate from the quarters, a reward for loyalty, for betraying his own people. Information, details, vulnerabilities. For the first time in 15 years, Goliath was planning something beyond survival. He was planning justice. That night, in the small cabin he had shared with Naomi, Goliath could not sleep. The space felt enormous without her, empty, haunted by memories of her laughter, her breathing, the way she used to curl against him as it tried to disappear into his warmth. He sat on the floor. The bed was too small for him anyway, and he had only used it because Naomi liked the softness and the way it felt. 3 months until Naomi would give birth. 3 months until he would never see his child. 3 months of Master Blackwood profiting from their suffering. No, the thought came clear and sharp as a blade. No more waiting. No more hoping. No more believing that good behavior would ever earn him anything other than more chains. He had been patient for 15 years. A model slave, perfect property. And where had it gotten him? His wife sold, his child stolen before birth, his body studied and exhibited like a circus monster. Goliath reached beneath the floorboard where he had hidden Naomi's cloth. He pulled it out and pressed it to his face. Her scent was already fading. "I promise you," he whispered to the empty cabin. "I promised our child would be born free, and I keep my promises. But how? How does a slave, even a giant one, free anyone? He had no money, no connections, no power beyond his strength, unless he made power, unless he took it. The thought should have terrified him. It should have driven him to Master Blackwood, to confess these dark ideas before they became actions. Instead, Goliath felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. Terrible, violent hope. The next morning, Goliath began his preparations. Subtle things, small things no one would notice. When loading timber, he took extra time near the blacksmith shop, observing Josiah's routine, noting when the shop was empty and which tools hung where. When hauling water, he walked past the big house's kitchen entrance and counted the steps from the door to the main staircase. 23 steps. He memorized which floorboards creaked. When working the tobacco fields, he positioned himself where he could watch Overseer Thornton's morning rounds, confirming the timing. 5:30 every morning. Regular as clockwork. At meals, he listened, truly listened, to the conversations Master Blackwood had with his sons about money troubles, about debts, about the upcoming harvest, and whether it would be enough to cover their expenses. Knowledge accumulated like stones, one by one, building something heavy and dangerous. After 2 weeks, Uncle Moses approached Goliath in the fields. "You planning something?" Moses said quietly. It was not a question. It was a statement. Goliath kept working, not looking at the old man. "Don't know what you mean." Moses snorted softly. "Boy, I'm 80 years old. I've been enslaved since before. You were born. I know the look of a man who is about to commit violence." Goliath's hands paused on the tobacco bundle he was tying. "Then you should stay away from me." "I should, but I won't." Moses glanced around to be sure no overseers were close. "You're going to need help." "Why would you help me?" "Because I'm too old to run, too old to fight, but I ain't too old to want to see justice done." Moses' voice dropped even lower. "And because that man sold your pregnant wife. That's evil even by their standards. Someone needs to pay for that. If I tell you what I'm planning and we're caught, they'll torture you, kill you. I know." Moses smiled, showing the gaps where his teeth used to be. "I'm 80 years old, and I've been whipped more times than you got scars. There ain't nothing they can do to me that's worse than what I've already lived through. So I'll ask again, do you need help? Goliath looked at the old man, really looked at him. He saw decades of suffering carved into every line of his face, and the strength that kept him alive through horrors Goliath could barely imagine. I need 3 things, Goliath said at last. I need to know who I can trust. I need to know the layout of the big house, every room, every exit. And I need to know when Marcus Doyle comes back. Doyle, the slave trader? He comes through here every 3 months, checks on his investments. Master Blackwood mentioned he'd return in October to see if Naomi had delivered. Moses nodded slowly. So you're planning to wait until he's here. Kill all of them at once. Yes. That's bold. That's Nat Turner bold. You know what happened to him. They caught him. Hanged him. I know. Goliath tied off the tobacco bundle with more force than necessary. But he killed 57 white people first. 57. He showed the whole South that slaves could fight back. That's what they're really afraid of, isn't it? Not individual escapes. Not even small rebellions. They're afraid we'll remember we outnumber them. That together we're stronger. And you think you can make them afraid? I think I can make Halifax County never sleep peacefully again. Moses was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled, a terrible and joyful expression. All right then, let me tell you who you can trust. Over the next 2 months, Goliath built his coalition carefully. Josiah the blacksmith, 30 years old, strong as an ox, with access to every metal tool and weapon on the plantation. His wife had been sold 2 years earlier. He had nothing left to lose. Ruth the midwife, 45, with knowledge of herbs and poisons that could drop a man without leaving a mark. She had delivered 3 babies that year and watched 2 of them be sold away from their mothers within weeks. Something in her had broken after the 3rd. Moses the coachman. Yes, he was 80, but he knew every road in Halifax County. More importantly, he knew which paths led north, which families were Quakers, and where the Underground Railroad stations were hidden. Samuel the field hand, only 23, but the strongest man on a plantation after Goliath. Young enough to run, young enough to live free. And there was one more, someone unexpected. Rebecca. She was a house slave, the personal maid to Mistress Constance. 18 years old, beautiful, and completely trusted by the Blackwood family, which meant she heard everything. Miss Constance talks like we're not even there, Rebecca explained during a secret meeting in Goliath's cabin. Just yesterday, she told Master Blackwood the guest room window latch is broken, won't lock properly, and Dr. Whitmore is staying in that room next week. Goliath nodded slowly. Good. What else? Jacob keeps a pistol under his pillow. Nathaniel Jr. doesn't. Overseer Thornton sleeps with his door unlocked, drunk most nights by 10. And Master Blackwood? Rebecca's face hardened. Rifle in the study, loaded. Pistol in his bedroom drawer. He checks both every night before bed. Paranoid, especially after what happened at the Harrison plantation. What happened there? 2 weeks ago, a kitchen fire killed a master and his wife. The sheriff thinks it was an accident, but Rebecca paused meaningfully. The slaves were freed when the property was sold to pay debts. Convenient accident, don't you think? Uncle Moses chuckled. There's been 3 accidents like that in Virginia this year. Masters falling off horses. Mysterious poisonings. One fellow got trampled by his own cattle. We're getting smarter. That's what's happening. Learning that dead masters are free masters. Not free, Goliath corrected quietly. Dead. But yes, one leads the other. He looked around at the 5 faces gathered in his cabin. 5 people willing to risk everything. I need to be clear about something, Goliath said. This is an escape plan. This is revenge. Pure and simple. I'm going to kill everyone who had a hand in selling Naomi. That means Master Blackwood, Mistress Constance, the sons, Overseer Thornton, Dr. Whitmore, Driver Pete, and when Marcus Doyle returns, him especially. 8 people. 8 in one night, Samuel said quietly. In one night. After that, we run north. Moses knows the routes, but the killing comes first. That's non-negotiable. Rebecca spoke up, her voice soft but firm. Miss Constance once slapped me so hard I couldn't hear out of my left ear for a week because I put too much sugar in her tea. Too much sugar. I want in, all the way in. Josiah added, I watched Master Blackwood sell my wife. Told me I should thank him because she was difficult, and now I could have a better woman. I want him dead. My daughter was 6 when they sold her, Ruth said quietly. 6. They ripped her out of my arms, screaming. That was Master Blackwood's father, Samuel said. But the son is just as evil, Ruth replied. I'll help any way I can. Samuel and Moses simply nodded. Then we're agreed, Goliath said. October 23rd, the night of the harvest celebration. Master Blackwood always drinks heavily that night. The whole house will be drunk and careless. That's in 3 weeks, Rebecca said. 3 weeks, Goliath confirmed. 3 weeks to prepare, to gather what we need, to plan every detail. Because we only get one chance at this. If we fail, we die, Moses finished. But if we succeed, 8 monsters die with us, Goliath replied. Fair trade, Moses said. Fair trade, the others echoed. The preparations were meticulous. Josiah worked the forge every day, but certain items began to disappear into hidden corners. A knife here, a small axe there, chains that had broken and needed replacing. Instead of melting them down, he hid them. Weapons, tools, anything that could be used to kill. Ruth gathered herbs on her weekly foraging trips. Oleander from the ornamental gardens, hemlock from the creek beds, Jimson seeds from the fields. Nothing that looked openly suspicious. Midwives needed herbs for healing after all, but the quantities she collected were far more than any medical necessity required. Rebecca built a map of the big house inside her mind, every room, every window, every squeaking floorboard. She memorized Master Blackwood's bedtime routine. Always midnight, always the same pattern. Check the doors, check the weapons. One last glass of bourbon, then upstairs. Moses studied the patrol patterns of the county's slave catchers. They made their rounds every 3 days, checking plantations for runaways. Their next visit would be October 21st, 2 days before the planned uprising. Perfect timing. Samuel did what he did best. He worked hard, kept his head down, and prepared his body. He was the backup. If Goliath fell, Samuel would have to finish the job. And Goliath tested his limits. Late at night in his cabin, he wrapped his chains around his hands and pulled, testing the metal, feeling for weakness. The chains they had used on him for 15 years were strong enough to hold normal men. But Goliath had never been normal. On the first night, he pulled until his hands bled, and the links groaned but did not break. On the 5th night, one link cracked slightly, a hairline fracture invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. On the 10th night, that link snapped. Goliath stared at the broken chain in his hands, felt its weight, its promise. They think metal can hold me, he whispered to the empty cabin. They think chains make me property. They're about to learn different. He practiced with a broken chain, how to swing it for maximum force, how to wrap it around the throat, how to use 20 pounds of iron as a weapon instead of restraint, over and over, until his muscles memorized every motion, until the chain became an extension of his arm. By October 20th, 3 days before the uprising, Goliath was ready. But fate, as always, had other plans. Marcus Doyle arrived early. October 21st, 2 days ahead of schedule. His wagon rolled onto Blackwood Plantation at 3 in the afternoon, dust trailing behind it. Goliath was in the tobacco fields when he heard the commotion, raised voices in greeting, Master Blackwood's booming laugh. Marcus, we weren't expecting you until Thursday. I know, but I've got news about your investment. Thought you want to hear it in person. Goliath's blood turned to ice. News about the investment, about Naomi. He dropped a bundle of tobacco he was carrying and began walking toward the big house, not running, that would draw attention, but walking with purpose, close enough to hear. Uncle Moses saw him and whispered urgently, "Don't. Whatever you're thinking, don't." But Goliath was already past caring about caution. He positioned himself near the front porch, pretending to work on a broken wagon wheel, close enough to hear the conversation through the open windows. "So what's this news?" Master Blackwood asked. Doyle's voice carried clearly. "She delivered 2 weeks ago in New Orleans. Dead baby. Stillborn. The child was too large, deformed, too big for her body to carry. It tore her apart from the inside. The doctors tried to save it. And the woman?" There was a pause, heavy and terrible. "Didn't make it. Bled out during delivery. I'm sorry, Cornelius. I know you were hoping for a giant breeding pair." Master Blackwood cursed softly. "Damn. Well, at least I got my 3,000 out of it. Profit is profit. And I've got another proposition. If you're interested, there's a plantation in Mississippi looking for specialty labor. They've heard about your giant. They're willing to pay 8,000 if you're willing to sell." Goliath stopped hearing words. Dead. Naomi was dead. The baby, his son or his daughter, dead before he would ever know which. Gone. Everything he had endured, everything he had survived, everything he had planned. And she was dead anyway. The world tilted. His vision narrowed to a single point. The window where Master Blackwood and Marcus Doyle were calmly discussing profit margins while announcing the deaths of his family. "Boy." Overseer Thornton's voice cut through the fog. He was beside Goliath now, whip in hand. "What are you doing?" "Get back to work." Goliath turned slowly and looked down at Thornton from his full height. Thornton saw something in those eyes that made him step back, made his hand drift toward the pistol at his belt. "Now hold on." Goliath's hand shot out, impossibly fast for a man his size, closed around Thornton's throat and lifted. Thornton's feet left the ground. His hands clawed at Goliath's grip. His face went red, then purple. "Help!" someone screamed. "The giant's gone mad." But Goliath was already moving, carrying Thornton the way a child carries a doll, walking toward the big house, toward the porch where Master Blackwood and Marcus Doyle had emerged, drawn by the screams. "Goliath, put him down!" Master Blackwood shouted, his voice cracking with fear. Goliath squeezed. There was a sound like green with snapping. Thornton's body went limp. Goliath dropped the corpse and kept walking. Master Blackwood fumbled for the pistol at his belt, raised it with shaking hands. "Stop. I'll shoot. I swear I'll." The gun went off. The bullet struck Goliath's shoulder, punched through muscle, shattered bone. Goliath barely slowed. Master Blackwood fired again. This one hit Goliath in the chest, just left of center. Goliath stumbled, dropped to one knee, but did not fall. Blood ran down his torso, soaking his shirt. His breathing was heavy. But when he looked up at Master Blackwood, his eyes were clear, focused, filled with a hatred so pure it felt like it radiated outward. "You sold my wife," Goliath said, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder. "My child for profit. Your property. They were property. I sell what I own." Goliath stood. The movement should have been impossible with 2 bullet wounds, but he stood anyway. "Then let me show you what property can do." He charged. Master Blackwood emptied the pistol. 3 more shots. 2 missed. 1 struck Goliath's leg. It did not matter. Goliath hit the porch at full speed. 23 steps he had counted, planned to climb silently in the dark. Instead, he crashed through the front door like it was made of paper. Inside the big house, chaos erupted. Mistress Constance was in the parlor. She screamed when she saw Goliath, 7 feet 6 inches of bleeding, furious rage smashing through her foyer. Jacob came running from the study, rifle in hand. What the hell? He barely got the rifle halfway up before Goliath's hand closed around his throat. "You threw bread at my feet once," Goliath said quietly. Remember? Jacob's eyes bulged. He tried to speak, but Goliath's grip crushed his windpipe. I remember everything. Goliath lifted Jacob off the ground and threw him. Not pushed, threw him. The younger man's body flew 15 feet across the foyer and struck the far wall with a wet, hollow crunch. He did not get back up. Mistress Constance ran for the stairs. Goliath caught her in 3 strides. His massive hand clamped onto her shoulder and spun her around. "You call my wife girl," Goliath said. "You laughed when they took her away." "Please," Constance gasped. "Please, I'm sorry. I didn't." "You're not sorry," Goliath said. "You're scared. There's a difference." He grabbed her by the throat, not squeezing yet, just holding her, and carried her back into the parlor. He sat her down in her favorite chair, the one she had occupied 1,000 times while house slaves served her tea. "Stay," he commanded, as if she were a dog. Then he turned to hunt the others. Nathaniel Blackwood, Jr. was in the upstairs hallway, trying to load his rifle. His hands were shaking so badly, he dropped the bullets twice. "Stay back," Nathaniel screamed. "Stay back, you animal." Goliath walked toward him slowly. Inevitably, Nathaniel pulled the trigger. Click. He had forgotten the chamber around. "Oh, God. Oh, God, please." Goliath took the rifle from his hands as easily as taking a toy from a child. He examined it for a moment, then swung it like a club. The stock connected with Nathaniel's head. Bone crunched. The younger man collapsed, blood pouring from his shattered skull. 2 down, 4 to go. Dr. Whitmore was in the guest room, trying to escape through the broken window latch Rebecca had mentioned. He had one leg out when Goliath entered. "Ah," Goliath said softly. The scientist froze and slowly turned to face the giant he had cut, measured, and studied for years. "I can explain," Whitmore stammered. "It was just research, purely academic." "You cut me," Goliath said, 23 times. I counted every scar. Every time you treated me like an animal. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "No, you're not. You're just scared the specimen is fighting back." Goliath grabbed Dr. Whitmore by the ankle and dragged him back through the window. The doctor slammed onto the floor. The air knocked from his lungs. "Let me show you what it's like," Goliath said almost conversationally. "Being studied, being treated like you're not human." He picked up the medical bag Whitmore always carried and dumped its contents onto the floor. Scalpels, bone saws, measuring instruments. Dr. Whitmore tried to crawl away. Goliath stepped on his leg. Not hard enough to break it, just hard enough to pin him in place. "This won't be academic," Goliath said, picking up a scalpel. "This will be personal." The doctor's screams echoed throughout the big house. By the time Goliath was finished, Dr. Artemis Whitmore had 23 cuts, 1 for every scar he had given Goliath. But unlike Goliath, Dr. Whitmore did not survive the experiment. Outside, chaos had spread. The other slaves had heard the gunshots. Then they saw Goliath charge the big house. Now they faced a choice: join him or try to stop him. Uncle Moses made the choice for them. He stood in the center of the slave quarters and shouted, "Tonight it happens. Tonight, anyone who wants freedom, follow me." Josiah emerged from the blacksmith shop, arms full of weapons. "Who's with us?" 20 hands went up, then 30, then 40. Within minutes, every slave on Blackwood Plantation had armed themselves with whatever they could find: farm tools, kitchen knives, lengths of chain. Driver Pete. Uncle Moses shouted, "Where is he?" "His cabin," someone yelled. The mob moved as one. 40 people, unified in purpose for the first time in their lives. They found Pete trying to bar his door. Too late. Josiah kicked it open. The door exploded inward, knocking Pete to the ground. "Please," Pete begged, scrambling backward. I was just doing what I was told." "So are we," Josiah said coldly. The mob fell on driver Pete like a wave. When they were finished, there was nothing left that could be recognized. Back in the big house, Goliath found Master Cornelius Blackwood in his study. He was trying to reload his rifle with hands that would not stop shaking. Bullets rolled off the desk and onto the floor. His expensive whiskey had spilled, mixing with the blood that had dripped from Goliath's wounds all the way up the stairs. "Stay away," Cornelius warned, but there was no strength in his voice, only terror. "I'll have you hanged, burned, drawn, and quartered." "You'll be dead," Goliath replied simply. "I paid $4,500 for you. You're my property." "I was never your property," Goliath said. "I was just waiting." He crossed the study in 2 strides, grabbed Master Blackwood by the front of his expensive shirt, and lifted him off the ground. "My wife's name was Naomi. My child, I will never know if it was a son or a daughter. You sold them for profit." "It was just business," Cornelius gasped. "Nothing personal." "It was everything personal." Goliath carried Master Blackwood to the window, the same window Cornelius had stood at so many times, looking out over his plantation, surveying his property. "You like the view from here," Goliath said. "Let me give you a better one." He threw Master Cornelius Blackwood through the window. The glass exploded outward. Blackwood's body tumbled through the air, his scream cutting off abruptly when he struck the ground 2 stories below. The impact killed him instantly. Goliath stood at the shattered window, breathing hard, blood streaming down his torso from his wounds. Below, the slaves of Blackwood Plantation had gathered. 40 faces turned upward, some terrified, some awed, all of them suddenly, impossibly free. Marcus Doyle tried to run. He had reached his wagon and was trying to unhitch it when Goliath emerged from the big house. "No, no, 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 no," Doyle muttered, fumbled with the reins, his fingers slipping on the leather. Goliath walked across the yard. Each step left a bloody footprint behind him. "You told him she was dead," Goliath said. Goliath said, "You made it sound like it was nothing, like you were talking about crop failures." "I'm sorry. I didn't know you. I didn't think." "No," Goliath interrupted. "You didn't think because you never thought we were human enough to grieve." He reached the wagon. Doyle tried to whip the horses forward, but Goliath grabbed the harness. The horses reared and screamed, but they could not break free. "She was pregnant," Goliath continued. "For months. You killed her. You killed my child." "It wasn't me. The doctors. The delivery I just arranged to..." "You sold her to people who used her as a breeding experiment. You knew she might die. You didn't care." Goliath pulled Doyle from the wagon. The slave trader hit the ground hard and began to sob openly. "Please, please, I'll pay you," Doyle begged. "I have money. $3,000. It's yours. All of it. Just let me go." "3,000, Goliath repeated quietly. "That's what you paid for my wife's life. That's what my child was worth." He bent down, his massive frame towering over the trembling man. "Let me show you what your life is worth." Goliath's hands found the chains attached to Doyle's wagon, the same chains used to secure human cargo. 20 pounds of iron, strong enough to restrain 3 people. He wrapped them around Doyle's neck. "Please, please." But Goliath was done listening to white men beg. He pulled. The chains tightened. Doyle's face went red, then purple. His hands clawed helplessly at the iron. Goliath did not stop until long after Doyle stopped moving. When it was over, 8 bodies lay scattered across Blackwood Plantation. Master Cornelius Blackwood, shattered on the ground beneath his study window. Mistress Constance Blackwood, found dead in her parlor chair, fear having stopped her heart. Jacob Blackwood, broken against the wall. Nathaniel Blackwood Jr., his skull crushed. Overseer Thornton, his neck snapped. Dr. Artemis Whitmore, with 23 cuts too many. Driver Pete, unrecognizable after the mob finished with him. Marcus Doyle, strangled with his own chains. The sun set over Halifax County, painting the sky blood red. In the middle of it all stood Goliath, wounded and soaked in blood, his own and others, surrounded by 40 freed slaves who looked at him with something between terror and reverence. "What do we do now?" Samuel asked. Goliath looked north, toward freedom, toward the mountains where he had heard runaways could hide, towards something beyond slavery. "We run," he said simply. "We find others like us, and we never stop fighting." Uncle Moses stepped forward. "Boy, you're bleeding bad." "I know," Goliath said. He could feel his strength fading, feel the blood loss catching up to him. "But not yet, not quite yet. The militia will come," Rebecca warned. "By morning, they'll have an army hunting us." "Then we leave tonight," Goliath replied. He looked around at the faces watching him. "Anyone who wants to stay, stay. Anyone who wants freedom, come with me." We head for the Blue Ridge Mountains. There are Maroon communities there, places where former slaves live free. "That's 300 miles, Josiah said. Then we better start walking." The exodus began at midnight. 53 slaves, every person from Blackwood Plantation, plus a few from neighboring farms who had heard what happened and decided to take their chance, vanished into the Virginia wilderness. They traveled by night and hid by day. Uncle Moses knew the routes, the safe houses, the Quaker families who had runaways in wagons with false bottoms. But the journey was harder than any of them had imagined. On the second night, slave catchers found their trail. Bloodhounds bayed in the darkness. Torches moved through the trees. Goliath turned to face them alone and told the others to keep moving. "You can't fight them all," Ruth whispered. "I can slow them down." The slave catchers expected frightened runaways, desperate and starving. They did not expect a 7'6" giant to charge out of the darkness like a vengeful god. The fight was brief and brutal. 3 slave catchers died before the rest fled, shaken by what they had seen. A giant covered in blood, roaring in a language they did not understand, swinging a broken chain as if it weighed nothing. They would later claim he was possessed by demons or immune to bullets. Neither was true, but fear makes men believe what they want to believe. 2 weeks later, the group reached the Blue Ridge Mountains. They had lost people along the way, for were captured by patrollers. 2 died from their injuries. 1 turned back, choosing the cruelty he knew over the freedom he did not. But 46 made it. 46 people who had once been property now living in a hidden community of former slaves and free black families who had built something impossible. A town, a real town, gardens, cabins, children playing in freedom. The elder of the community, a woman named Grace who had escaped 30 years earlier, looked at the newcomers with knowing eyes. "You're the ones from Blackwood Plantation," she said. It was not a question. "We are," Goliath replied. "We heard 8 died in one night. The biggest uprising Virginia has seen since Nat Turner. They've put a $15,000 bounty on you." "I know." Grace smiled. "Good. Come in. You're safe here. For now." For 4 years, Goliath lived in the mountains. The community of freed slaves grew. More runaways arrived, bringing stories of the giant of Virginia, of how one man had killed 8 whites and led an army of slaves to freedom. The stories grew in the telling. By 1857, some claimed Goliath had killed 20 men. By 1858, it was 30. Goliath never corrected them. Let the legend grow. Legends inspired action. Across Virginia, subtle rebellions increased. Kitchen fires that killed masters. Overseers found dead in accidents. Slaves simply walking away and never coming back. The system was cracking, and Goliath's name, once given in mockery, had become something else. A promise, a warning. The giant could be killed, but the idea of the giant was immortal. In October of 1860, Goliath was repairing a cabin when the militia finally found him. 200 armed men, the Virginia National Guard. They had spent 3 years searching, following rumors. checking every mountain hollow, and at last they had found it, the Maroon community. Elder Grace rang the warning bell. They're coming! Everyone took their positions. The community had prepared for this. 46 had become 80. 80 people who had chosen death over slavery, who had spent years building defenses. But 200 trained. Soldiers was too many. "We can't win this," Josiah said quietly. He was graying now, the years in the mountains etched into his face. "No," Goliath agreed, "but we can make them remember." He turned to the community, to the people he had lived with, laughed with, helped raise children with. Anyone who can run, go deep into the mountains. They can't catch everyone. "What about you?" Ruth asked. Goliath smiled. "I'll give you time to run." "That's suicide," Samuel protested. "I've been dead since they stole me from Africa," Goliath said calmly. "This is just my body catching up." He would not listen to arguments. He would not accept backup. Instead, he armed himself with what they had: a hunting rifle with 7 shots, 2 pistols with 12 rounds between them, and his chains, the same chains he had broken 4 years earlier, now polished by use and turned into a weapon. Then he walked out to meet an army. The Virginia National Guard had expected a siege. They expected to surround the community and starve them out. What they got instead was Goliath walking out of the tree line alone, 7 feet 6 inches tall, scarred and massive, holding a rifle like it was a child's toy. Captain Morrison, leading the militia, stared in disbelief. "That's him. That's the giant everyone's been terrified of." "So we shoot him from here," a soldier said. "No," Morrison replied. "I want him alive. For trial. For hanging. I want every slave in Virginia to see what happens to insurrectionists." He raised his voice. "You giant, you're surrounded. Surrender and we'll guarantee you a trial." Goliath's answer was to raise his rifle and fire. The shot took Morrison in the shoulder, spinning him around. Fire, fire. 30 rifles discharged at once. Most missed. The soldiers were exhausted, frightened, shooting at a figure backlit by the setting sun in unfamiliar mountain terrain. But some hit. Goliath staggered as bullets tore through him, shoulder, chest, leg, side. He did not fall. Instead, he charged. The Virginia National Guard had never seen anything like it. A man absorbing bullets and still running, still fighting. Goliath crashed into their front line like a living cannonball. His chains whipped out and shattered one soldier's jaw. The stock of his rifle crushed another man's skull. His bare hands grabbed, lifted, threw, and destroyed. He was shot 9 times in the first minute, 11 times in the second, but he kept fighting. One soldier later wrote in his journal, "It wasn't human. It couldn't be. We shot again and again, and it just kept coming, like killing a bear or a mountain, something too big and too angry to die." By the 3rd minute, 20 soldiers were down, dead, dying, or fleeing in terror. Goliath was on his knees now. Too much blood loss. Too many wounds. Even he had limits. When a young lieutenant approached cautiously, rifle aimed at Goliath's head, the giant summoned one final surge of strength, reached out, grabbed the rifle barrel, bent it like soft metal, and then collapsed. They shot him 14 more times to be sure. 37 bullets in total. And even then, it took 3 hours for him to finally die. The Virginia National Guard dragged his body down from the mountains and displayed it in Richmond for a week. Proof, they said, that the rebellion was over, that the giant was dead. They believed it would discourage future uprisings. It did the opposite. Slaves across Virginia saw the body of the giant, riddled with bullets, yet somehow still defiant even in death, and they learned a lesson. It takes 37 bullets to kill a freed man, and even then he dies on his feet. Within 6 months, 3 more major uprisings erupted across Virginia. By 1861, the state was so unstable that when the Civil War began, entire plantations could no longer function. Slaves simply walked away and dared their masters to stop them. The legend of Goliath, the 7'6" giant who broke his chains and killed his oppressors, spread like wildfire. Frederick Douglass mentioned him in a speech in 1862. They call him an animal, a monster, a murderer. But I call him what he was, a man who chose death over slavery, and in choosing death, showed us all how to live. Today, Halifax County does not speak much about Goliath. The official records describe the incident as a tragic slave uprising resulting in 8 deaths and substantial property damage. Property damage, as if human beings could be property, as if murder could be damage. But in the black communities of Virginia, the story is still told, passed down through generations. Embellished, mythologized, yes, but with the core truth intact. A man stolen from Africa, displayed like a circus animal, tortured in the name of science, worked like a beast his wife sold, his child killed before birth, and when he'd endured all he could endure, he broke his chains, killed 8 men in one night, led 50 slaves to freedom, and when an army came to stop him, he stood alone and fought until his final breath. They called him Goliath, meaning the giant who falls. But he never fell. Not really. Because even now, more than 160 years later, his name is still spoken. His story is still told. And every time someone hears it, truly hears it, they learn the same lesson Goliath taught Halifax County that October night. Chains can be broken. Masters can bleed. And freedom is always worth the price. In 1923, a historian from Howard University traveled to Halifax County researching slave rebellions. He interviewed descendants of people who had been enslaved on nearby plantations, people whose grandparents had witnessed the aftermath of that October night. One woman, 93 years old, told him this. "My grandmother was a house slave on a Morrison place, 2 miles from Blackwood Plantation. She said that the morning after, they could see smoke rising from where the big house had been. Master Morrison gathered all his slaves, maybe 40 of us, and told us what happened. A slave named Goliath killed his master and 7 others. He said, then led a rebellion. They're hunting him now, and anyone who helps runaways will be hanged alongside them." He meant it as a warning, as fear. But my grandmother said when she looked around at the other slaves, she didn't see fear. She saw something else. Something Master Morrison couldn't recognize because he had never felt it. Hope. That night, 3 slaves from a Morrison plantation ran, just disappeared into the darkness. Master Morrison offered rewards, sent slave catchers, and threatened the ones who stayed. But nobody talked. Nobody knew anything. Within a year, 5 more had vanished. By 1865, when freedom finally came, only half of the original slaves were still there. The rest had followed Goliath's example. My grandmother told me that the giant didn't just kill 8 white men. He killed the idea that we had to accept slavery. He showed us that we could fight back, that we could win, that we could be free, even if it meant dying. The historian recorded her story along with dozens of others, but his manuscript was never published. It was considered too controversial, too inflammatory. The white-owned publishing houses of the 1920s were not interested in stories that celebrated slave rebellion. The manuscript sat in a vault at Howard University for 70 years, until 1993, when a graduate student discovered it and finally brought those stories to light in the mountains of Virginia. The Maroon community Goliath helped establish lasted until 1863. When the Emancipation Proclamation was issued, the 80 residents faced a choice: stay hidden in the mountains or come down into a world that suddenly, impossibly, called them free. Most chose to stay. Freedom on paper did not mean freedom in reality, not in Virginia, not in 1863. But some ventured down, testing the new world for themselves. Uncle Moses was one of them. He was 88 by then, ancient by any measure. He walked into the town of Halifax and stood in the center of the square, the same square where slaves had been auctioned for decades. A crowd gathered, white people uncertain and hostile, black people amazed and terrified in equal measure. Moses stood there for an hour. He did not move. He simply stood, daring anyone to challenge his right to exist in that space. Nobody did. Finally, he spoke, his voice carrying across the square. He said he had once known a man, a giant 7 feet 6 inches tall, the strongest man he had ever met and the bravest. They had beaten him, studied him like an animal, sold his wife, killed his child, and when he had endured all he could endure, he had stood up, broken his chains, and shown the entire South that we are not property, we are not animals. We are human beings, and human beings die free or not at all. His name was Goliath. Moses said he had watched him kill 8 men in one night, watched him lead 50 people to freedom, watched him stand alone against an army. They shot him 37 times before he fell, 37 bullets, and he died with his eyes open, staring north toward freedom. Moses said he was 88 years old and had been a slave for 84 of those years, and that he was standing there free because of that man, because Goliath had taught him that freedom is not given, it is taken. He told every white person listening that they remember every injustice, every cruelty, every family torn apart, and they will never forget. And he told every black person listening to remember Goliath, to remember that one man, just one, can change everything, can inspire hundreds, can crack a system that seemed unbreakable. They tried to erase him from history. They tried to make them forget, but they would not forget. They carried his story in their bones, in their blood. In every breath they took as free people. Moses collapsed halfway through his speech, exhausted, dying. They carried him to a doctor, a black doctor, one of the first in Virginia. The doctor examined him and shook his head. His heart was giving out, worn down by decades of strain. He had days, maybe hours. When they told Moses, he smiled. He said it was good. He had lived long enough. He had seen slavery end. He had seen them walk free. That was more than most of his generation had ever been given. He died that night, peacefully, in a bed instead of field, a free man instead of property. At his funeral, more than 200 black people attended. They sang spirituals, the same song slaves had once used to communicate in code, to plan escapes, to preserve hope. And they sang a new one, a song that had risen from the mountains, from Maroon communities, from freed people spreading across the South. The Ballad of Goliath. It went like this. 7 feet and 6 inches tall, broke his chains and heard the call, killed 8 masters in one night, showed the South we'd stand and fight. They shot him down, but he won't fall. His spirit lives in one and all. Remember, brothers, remember well, the giant who broke the gates of hell. Goliath, Goliath, hear his name. Freedom's price is blood and flame. Goliath, Goliath, stand up tall. When one man rises, he breaks the wall. The song was never written down. It could not be. Literacy was still rare among freed slaves. But it did not need to be written. It lived in voices, in memory, in the shared consciousness of a people who survived the unsurvivable. It spread from Virginia to the Carolinas, from Georgia to Mississippi, from Louisiana to Texas. Everywhere formerly enslaved people gathered. They sang about the giant who broke his chains. In 1872, a white journalist from New York traveled south to document Reconstruction. He was interviewing freed people about their lives when he heard the song. Intrigued, he asked where it came from. An elderly woman, once enslaved on a plantation in Alabama, told him it was the song of Goliath, the giant from Virginia. Had he never heard of him? The journalist admitted he had not. She said that was because white people did not want anyone to know what one black man had done when he decided he had suffered enough. She told him the story. There was a man so tall he had to duck through doorways, so strong he could carry what 3 men could not. They bought him like a horse, worked him like a mule, and when they wanted entertainment, they made him fight 3 men at once. He never complained, never fought back. For 15 years, he was a perfect slave. Then they sold his pregnant wife. sold her to be used as a breeding experiment. She died giving birth. The baby died too, and something inside that giant broke. He killed his master. He killed his master's wife. He killed the sons. He killed the overseer. He killed the doctor who had been experimenting on him. He killed the slave trader. 8 people in one night, with nothing but his bare hands and a broken chain. Then he led every slave on that plantation to freedom. 50 people into the mountains. They lived free for 4 years. For years, while the militia hunted them. And when they finally found him, he stood alone so the others could escape. One man against 200 soldiers. They shot him 37 times. 37, and he still killed 20 of them before he died. Now you tell me, sir, is it the action of property of an animal, or is it the action of man who would rather die free than live enslaved? The journalist wrote the story and sent it to his newspaper in New York. They refused to publish it. Too inflammatory, his editor said. The South is trying to rebuild. Stories like this will only stir up tensions. The journalist quit his job, published the story himself as a pamphlet, and distributed it on his own. Most copies were burned. In the South, by angry whites who saw it as dangerous propaganda. In the North, by people who wanted to move past the ugliness of slavery and not be reminded of it. But some copies survived, and in those survivors, Goliath's story lived on. In the 1920s, during the Harlem Renaissance, black artists, writers, and musicians were reclaiming their narrative, telling their own stories in their own voices. Langston Hughes heard the ballad Goliath in a speakeasy. He listened as an old man sang it with tears running down his face. Afterward, Hughes sought him out and asked about the song. "My grandfather taught it to me," the old man said. "He was born a slave, freed in 1865. He told me his grandfather actually knew Goliath, worked alongside him in the tobacco fields of Virginia. Said Goliath wasn't just big. He was quiet, thoughtful. He used to sing songs from Africa when he thought nobody was listening. Beautiful songs, sad songs. My great-great-grandfather said everyone knew Goliath was different, special. But they thought his specialness was in his size, his strength. Turned out his specialness was in his humanity, in his refusal to accept what they tried to make him, in his determination to be a man, not property. When word spread that he had killed his masters and freed the plantation, my great-great-grandfather said it was like lightning striking. Suddenly the impossible seemed possible. If a giant could do it, maybe ordinary folks could too. Within weeks, slaves were vanishing from plantations across Virginia. Not by the hundreds, but one by one, steady and constant, each inspired by Goliath's example. The system started cracking. And 40 years later, when the Civil War came, those cracks became chasms. Hughes went home and wrote a poem. He called it The Giant. It was never published during his lifetime, considered too controversial and too openly violent. But the manuscript survived, and in 1994 it was included in a posthumous collection of his work. The final stanza read, "They call him murderer, call him beast, call him monster, call him least among the human, among the free. But I call him what he came to be, a man who said no more, a man who broke the door, a man who showed us all the way to turn the night into the day." In 2015, a group of historians from the University of Virginia decided to conduct a comprehensive study of slave rebellions in the state. They combed through court records, property inventories, letters, diaries, and newspaper accounts from the 1850s. What they found shocked them. October 1856, Blackwood Plantation, 8 deaths in one night. Property damage estimated at $50,000, a fortune at the time. The official record listed it as an unfortunate incident involving a mentally disturbed slave. But the unofficial accounts, letters between plantation owners, private diary entries, told a very different story. They spoke of terror, of white families afraid to sleep at night, of increased security and growing paranoia. One letter from a plantation owner in a neighboring county to his brother in Richmond read, The Negro uprising at Blackwoods has unsettled the entire region. 8 men dead, including Cornelius himself. The slave, a giant of impossible size, killed them all with his bare hands, then led every slave on the property to freedom. They've offered a reward of $15,000, the largest I've ever heard. But I don't think they'll catch him. The Negroes are protecting him. Even under threat of death, they won't talk. I've doubled my security. I sleep with a pistol under my pillow. Margaret wants to return to Richmond, but I can't abandon the plantation. Not during harvest. Yet I confess, brother, I'm afraid. If it happened at Blackwoods, it could happen here. The Negroes are watching us differently now, like they're measuring us, calculating. I fear we've been sitting on a powder keg all these years, and Blackwood's giant just lit the fuse. The historians published their findings in 2017. The paper was titled The Blackwood Uprising, Forgotten Catalyst of the American Civil War. Their thesis was simple. The famous slave rebellions, Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, Gabriel's Rebellion, were not the only forces destabilizing the slave system. Smaller uprisings, individual acts of resistance, men like Goliath who refused to accept bondage, accumulated, spread, and inspired others. By 1860, the South was so destabilized, so paranoid, so convinced their slaves would murder them in their beds, that secession began to seem like the only option. Better to fight a war, one Southern politician wrote, than to live in daily fear of our own property. The paper won awards and was cited hundreds of times. But more importantly, it brought Goliath's story back into the light. Mainstream history had ignored him, buried him, pretended he never existed. But he did exist, and his actions mattered. They changed the course of history, in ways both large and small. In 2019, a sculptor from Richmond proposed a monument, a statue 7 feet 6 inches tall, cast in bronze, depicting Goliath in the act of breaking his chains. The proposal sparked immediate controversy. He was a murderer, some argued. We cannot glorify violence. He was a freedom fighter, others countered. We cannot condemn the violence of resistance while ignoring the violence of slavery. The debate raged for months. City council meetings, public forums, newspaper op-eds. Finally, a compromise was reached. The statue would be erected, but not in the city center. Instead, it would stand in the historic Jackson Ward neighborhood, traditionally black, the heart of Richmond's African-American community. The unveiling took place on Juneteenth, 2021. More than 5,000 people attended. Black families from across Virginia, historians, activists, and descendants of those who had been enslaved in Halifax County gathered to witness it. The statue was magnificent. Goliath stood tall, chains broken and falling from his wrists, his face lifted upward, defiant, proud, and free. At the base was an inscription, Goliath, born unknown, Africa, circa 1826. Died October 1860, Blue Ridge Mountains, Virginia. I was never your property. I was just waiting. The crowd did not sing the national anthem. They did not sing hymns. They sang the Ballad of Goliath, the song that had survived 165 years of suppression, passed from voice to voice, generation to generation. 7 feet and 6 inches tall, broke his chains and heard the call. An elderly woman, 96 years old, a descendant of slaves who worked on a plantation neighboring the Blackwoods, placed flowers at the base of the statue. My great-great-grandmother told my great-grandmother, who told my grandmother, who told my mother, who told me. Goliath was real. He lived. He fought. He died free. And because he died free, we could live free. That's worth remembering. That's worth honoring. Today, if you visit Halifax County, Virginia, you will not find any official commemoration of Goliath. No historical marker. No plaque. No mention in the local museum. Blackwood Plantation is gone, burned to the ground that October night and never rebuilt. The land was subdivided and sold. Now is farmland, tract housing developments, a Dollar General, But if you speak to the black residents of the county, the descendants of those who survived slavery, they will tell you about him. They will take you to a spot in the woods, a small clearing where, according to oral tradition, Goliath spent his last 3 years before the militia found him. There is nothing there now, only trees and undergrowth. But they say if you stand quietly enough, if you listen carefully, you can still hear his voice. Singing those Dinka songs from his childhood, songs about home, about freedom, about a river he would never see again. They say his spirit never left, that he is still there, standing guard, protecting runaways who no longer need protecting, breaking chains that no longer bind. It is only a legend, of course, but legends matter, because legends carry truths that fact alone cannot hold. This is the story of Goliath, the 7'6" giant from Virginia, who decided that death was better than slavery, who killed 8 men in one night, who led 50 souls to freedom, who stood alone against an army and died on his feet, never on his knees. History tried to erase him, to reduce him to a footnote, to pretend he never existed. But he did exist, and his legacy lives on. It lives in every person who refuses to accept injustice, in every act of resistance against oppression, in every voice that says no more. Goliath's chains are broken. His body long ago turned to dust. But his spirit is immortal, and it lives in everyone who hears his story and understands the lesson he left behind. You can cage the body, but you cannot chain the soul. And when a soul decides it will be free, truly and completely free, there is no power on earth that can stop it. Not chains, not guns, not armies, nothing. That was the lesson of Goliath. And 165 years after his death, that lesson still echoes, still inspires, still reminds us that freedom is not given. It is taken with blood if necessary, with courage always, and with the unshakable belief that we are human beings, not property, that we deserve dignity, that we deserve freedom, and that we will accept nothing less. Goliath taught Halifax County that lesson in October of 1856, and the world is still learning it today.